We're evolving beyond outdated thinking. Some people simply can't keep pace with our new vision. The young man paused, his expensive watch catching the light as he adjusted his sleeve. We need innovators, not relics of my father's era. I felt every word like a needle piercing my skin. 14 years of my life dedicated to this company, and now I was being called a relic, a disposable piece of history. The conference room wasn't just filled with my colleagues. It was filled with witnesses to my humiliation. Drew, the founder's son, stared directly at me across the table, not even trying to hide his target. At 32, he was 15 years my junior with an MBA and a trust fund, but zero actual experience. The smirk on his face made it clear. This wasn't about innovation. This was about power. I glanced down at the packet he'd distributed. Strategic Restructuring Initiative, 18 policy changes in 6 weeks, each one more impossible for me to meet than the last. Before I continue, I want to thank you for listening to my story today. I'm curious, where are you tuning in from? Drop a comment below. Your support means everything as I share the most difficult chapter of my life. My name is Adira, and until 6 weeks ago, I was the director of community preparedness at a company that helped towns create emergency response systems. Not the most glamorous work, but it saved lives. When I started, we served 3 communities. Under my leadership, we expanded to 27 towns across the state. I never planned on this career. I studied public health in college, thinking I'd work for a nonprofit, but life takes unexpected turns. At 33, with a newborn and a 3-year-old at home, I needed stability. When Jeffrey, the company founder, offered me a job developing training for small towns that couldn't afford big emergency management systems, it felt perfect. We don't need fancy offices or expensive suits, Jeffrey told me during my interview. We need someone who understands that when disasters hit, it's regular people who suffer first. Someone who can teach them how to protect themselves until help arrives. For 14 years, that's exactly what I did. I drove to town halls and community centers. I trained volunteer firefighters and school nurses. I created easy-to-follow guides that even children could understand during emergencies. My work wasn't flashy. No one got rich. But when the river flooded in Lakeland and every resident evacuated safely because of our protocols, I knew my work mattered. When the chemical spill in Westport was contained without casualties because local shopkeepers knew exactly what to do, I felt proud. Jeffrey understood the value in this. His own mother had died during a natural disaster in a small town with no emergency plan. He built the company to prevent others from experiencing the same loss. Everything changed when Jeffrey turned 65. I'm retiring, he announced 3 months ago. Drew will take over as CEO. I'd met Drew a few times over the years. He usually appeared at holiday parties, glued to his phone, leaving early for more important engagements. He'd never shown interest in our work. The changes began immediately. First impressions matter, Drew announced during his first meeting as CEO. We're upgrading our image, starting with a new dress code. The new requirements specified designer brands and contemporary professional attire, clothes that would cost 3 months of my salary. The policy applied to everyone, even those of us who worked in the field, trudging through mud to help towns implement drainage systems. Next came mandatory weekend strategy retreats at exclusive resorts 4 hours from town. For most of us, with families, this was impossible. For me, with my husband Gregory recovering from back surgery and unable to handle our teenagers alone, it was completely out of the question. Attendance is required for continued employment, the memo stated. Week 3 brought the technology requirements. Everyone had to demonstrate advanced proficiency in 3 proprietary software systems completely unrelated to our work. Each certification cost $2,000, paid by the employee. I tried reasoning with Drew. These systems aren't used by any of our town partners. They don't have the budget for this software either. That's the problem with your thinking, Adira, he replied, not bothering to look up from his phone. Small towns are small business. We're pivoting to corporate clients. But our mission is whatever I say it is now. He finally looked at me. Maybe it's time you considered whether you still fit here. Each week brought new rules. Meeting quotas that required selling towns services they didn't need. Physical fitness requirements that had nothing to do with our work. Even a bizarre policy about personal social media accounts. By week 6, the 18th change appeared. All team leaders had to relocate to the state capital within 30 days to work from the new headquarters. For me, with 2 kids in high school and a husband still recovering from surgery, this was the final straw. I wasn't blind to what was happening. Drew couldn't fire me outright. My performance reviews were exemplary, and our town partners specifically requested to work with me. So instead, he created 18 different ways to make me quit. What stung most was watching my colleagues adapt. Some could afford the clothes and certifications. Others were young enough to relocate or work weekends. One by one, they adjusted to Drew's new world, while I became increasingly isolated. After the 18th change was announced, Drew approached me as I sat alone in the break room. "Adira," he said, dropping into the chair opposite me, "I notice you haven't accepted the transfer to the capital yet." "My family is rooted here," I replied. "My children are in school, my husband's medical care, so you're choosing not to comply with company policy." It wasn't a question but a trap. "These policies weren't created to improve our work," I said carefully. "They were created to push me out." He laughed, not bothering to deny it. "My father may have valued your community approach, but that's not where the money is. The sooner you understand that, the better. These towns depend on us," I reminded him. "When emergencies happen, they can hire someone else," he interrupted. "Or better yet, they can upgrade to our new premium services. Triple the price, half the work for us." He leaned forward. "Either way, your little crusade is finished. You can't just change everything overnight," I said. "There are procedures, protocols." "Actually, I can." Drew smiled and tapped a document on the table. Section 12B of the company charter gives leadership full authority to make operational changes without oversight, the provision you yourself drafted 7 years ago. I stared at him, feeling sick. He was right. During a period of rapid growth, I'd written that section to allow us flexibility during emergency situations. It was meant to help us save lives when minutes mattered. I never imagined it would be weaponized like this. "You have until Friday to accept the relocation or clear out your desk." He stood up. "Though, between us, I've already hired your replacement, someone with a more contemporary outlook." As he walked away, I felt 14 years of my life crumbling. I had 2 teenagers in school, a mortgage, medical bills from Gregory's surgery, and a career specialized in a field few companies valued. I couldn't just start over at 47. I went home that night and told Gregory everything. "Fight it," he said immediately, wincing as he shifted position on the couch, still recovering from his 3rd back surgery. "What he's doing has to be illegal." "Maybe," I admitted, "but legal battles take money we don't have and time I can't spare." Our daughter Miriam looked up from her homework. "Mom, you always tell us to stand up to bullies. This is different, honey." "Why? Because he's rich?" she challenged. "You built that program. Everyone knows it." I stared at my family, my husband unable to work while recovering, my daughter studying for college entrance exams, my son Lane practicing for his music audition in the next room. They needed stability, not a lengthy legal battle against someone with unlimited resources. But as I sat at our kitchen table reviewing my employment contract, something caught my eye, something I'd almost forgotten about, Section 12B. And suddenly, I knew exactly what to do. That night, I spread my papers across our kitchen table, scanning through the company charter by the dim light of our overhead lamp. Gregory had finally fallen asleep after taking his pain medication, and both kids were in their rooms. The house was quiet except for the occasional creak of the old floorboards. I found what I was looking for on page 17, Section 12B, the provision I'd helped draft 7 years earlier, during a period when we were expanding rapidly. It gave leadership the authority to make operational changes without lengthy approval processes during emergency situations. All operational changes fall under executive authority, as outlined in this section. I read aloud to myself, but there was more language I'd insisted on including when we drafted it. Amendments to this charter require board approval by simple majority. The board, 3 people still sat on it. Jeffrey, who had retained his position as chairman despite retiring from daily operations. Marion, his longtime business partner who had semi-retired 5 years ago. And Paolo, our legal counsel, who had been with the company since its founding. None of them were actively involved in day-to-day operations anymore. but they remained the official governing body. I pulled out my phone, checking the time, 11:47 p.m. Too late to call anyone, but not too late to draft an email. My hands trembled as I typed out a formal proposal to amend Section 12B. My amendment was simple but powerful. All operational changes affecting field staff or town partnerships must be reviewed and approved by the Town Partnership Committee before implementation. The Town Partnership Committee consisted of representatives from each community we served, people who knew me, people who valued our work, people who had no idea what was happening inside the company right now. I hesitated before pressing send. This wasn't just about saving my job anymore. This was about saving 14 years of work that protected real people in real emergencies. If Drew shifted our focus away from small towns to chase corporate profits, what would happen the next time there was a crisis? I hit send and went to bed, but sleep refused to come. I stared at the ceiling, going over every possible outcome. If the board rejected my proposal, I'd have to accept defeat. If they approved it, Drew would know exactly who was responsible. Either way, my time at the company was likely over. My phone buzzed at 6:13 a.m., an email from Jeffrey himself. Emergency board meeting called for 7:30 a.m. via conference call regarding charter amendment proposal. I called in at exactly 7:30, my heart pounding. Adira, I've gathered the board to discuss your proposed amendment. Jeffrey's voice sounded tired. Can you explain why you're suggesting this change? For the next 15 minutes, I outlined everything that had happened since Drew took over. The dress code changes, the weekend retreats, the technology requirements, the relocation demands. I explained how these changes made it impossible for me to continue my work, despite 14 years of successful service. These aren't operational necessities, I concluded. They're personal attacks designed to push out your original team in favor of Drew's friends. Silence followed. Is Drew aware you've proposed this amendment? Paulo asked. No, he's not. Another pause. The records show you wrote the original Section 12B, Marion noted. Why change it now? Because I wrote it to help us respond quickly during emergencies, I explained, not to give unlimited power to change the company's entire mission. These small towns depend on us. We're their safety net when disasters strike. The board asked me to leave the call while they deliberated. 30 minutes later, my phone rang again. Adira, we voted to approve your amendment, Jeffrey announced. It will be filed with the state registry immediately. I nearly collapsed with relief. Thank you. However, Jeffrey continued, his voice heavy, you should know that Drew won't take this well. This puts us all in a difficult position. I understand, I said, gripping the phone tightly. How do you want to proceed? Paulo asked. Drew doesn't know about this yet. I took a deep breath. I'll submit my resignation today. This isn't about keeping my job anymore. It's about protecting the work we've done for these towns. There was a long pause before Jeffrey spoke again. For what it's worth, I'm deeply sorry about all of this. I thought Drew would honor the company's mission. I see now I was wrong. After the call ended, I drafted my resignation letter. It was brief, professional, and gave 2 weeks' notice. I drove to the office and placed it on Drew's desk before he arrived. When I returned to my department, Talia, my assistant for the past 5 years, could immediately tell something was wrong. What happened? She asked, closing the door to my office. I resigned, I told her. Today is my last day. Her eyes widened. Because of the relocations? We could figure something out. Maybe you could commute part-time. It's more than that, I explained. Drew is changing the company's entire focus. He wants to abandon the small towns in favor of corporate clients. Talia sank into the chair across from my desk. But what about our programs? The emergency protocols we've spent years developing? That's why I'm telling you this, I said, lowering my voice. Before I leave today, I'm going to download copies of all our training materials and protocols. Is that legal? She whispered. They belong to the company, I acknowledged. But these towns need them. I'm not taking them to sell or profit from. I'm taking them to protect the people who depend on them. Talia nodded slowly. What can I do to help? By lunchtime, I had downloaded everything we'd created over the years. Emergency response guides, training protocols, implementation checklists. I saved them onto an external drive and slipped it into my purse. Drew appeared in my doorway at 2:30 p.m., my resignation letter in his hand. Giving up so easily? He asked, smirking. I expected more of a fight. Not everyone measures success by how hard they can push others down, I replied evenly. Well, regardless, I'll need you to cancel your meetings for the rest of the week. We'll have HR handle your exit today. My contract requires 2 weeks' notice, I pointed out. Drew laughed. Section 12B allows me to make operational changes as needed. I'm changing your notice period to effective immediately. He tossed a box onto my desk. Pack your things. Security will escort you out in 30 minutes. After he left, Talia slipped into my office. I heard, she said. Everyone's talking about it. This isn't right. It's okay, I told her, though it wasn't. Sometimes you have to know when to walk away from a battle to win the war. She helped me pack my personal items, the awards from grateful towns, the thank you letters from community members, the photos of team trainings. 14 years reduced to a single cardboard box. As security walked me to the door, my colleagues watched in stunned silence. Some looked away, afraid for their own positions. Others gave small nods of solidarity. Talia hugged me tightly before I left. What will you do now? She whispered. I'm not sure yet, I admitted, but I'm not finished. That evening, I sat at home feeling numb. Gregory found me staring at the wall in our living room, still in my work clothes. What happened? He asked, carefully lowering himself next to me, wincing from his still healing back. I told him everything. The resignation, the amendment, the unceremonious exit. So that's it? He asked when I finished. 14 years? Just over? Not exactly, I said slowly. The board approved my amendment before I resigned. Drew doesn't know yet, but every operational change he makes now requires approval from the town partnership committee. Gregory's eyes widened. And when will he find out? The quarterly town partnership meeting is tomorrow, I said. All 27 town representatives will be there, expecting to meet with me about our ongoing programs. But you won't be there. No, I confirmed. Drew will have to explain all his changes to them himself, changes they never approved, changes that affect programs their communities depend on. Gregory took my hand. Will it make a difference? He's still the CEO. Maybe not, I admitted. But those town representatives aren't his employees. They're elected officials with responsibilities to their communities. They won't be easily intimidated. The next morning, I woke up feeling strange. For the first time in 14 years, I had nowhere to go, no meetings to attend. I made breakfast for the kids, helped Lane practice his violin piece, quizzed Miriam on her calculus formulas. At 9:37 a.m., my phone buzzed with a text from Talia. TPM starting now. Drew just realized you're not here to run it. He looks panicked. I imagined him standing before 27 town representatives, trying to explain policies he barely understood for programs he didn't value. At 10:15, another text. Drew, trying to cancel meeting. Paulo showed up and said it's contractually required. Explained, you're no longer with company. Room in uproar. Throughout the day, updates continued to arrive from various colleagues. Mayor of Lakeland asking about protocol updates you promised. Drew has no idea what she's talking about. Westport rep questioning new pricing structure. Drew mentioned premium services, and room went silent. Someone asked about your amendment to Section 12B. Drew looked confused. Paulo handed him the updated charter. His face went white. That evening, Talia called me directly. The committee voted to freeze all recent policy changes pending review, she reported, her voice hushed as if she was hiding somewhere to make the call. Drew is furious. He's been in Jeffrey's old office for hours, yelling about betrayal and sabotage. What about the town partners? I asked. They're not budging, she said. They've requested all documentation for operational changes made in the last 6 weeks. They're questioning everything. The pivot away from small towns, the price increases, the staff relocations. They're saying these changes violate their partnership agreements. I felt a complicated mix of emotions. Satisfaction that my work wouldn't be dismantled overnight. Sadness that it had come to this. Fear for what might happen next. There's more, Talia added. They're asking why you're not there. Paulo had to explain you were forced out. The Lakeland mayor asked if your departure had anything to do with the sudden policy shifts. What did Paulo say? He said the board is conducting a full review of recent management decisions. She paused. Adira, I think this is bigger than just getting back at Drew. The town representatives are talking about contract violations, Paulo mentioned potential breach of fiduciary duty. After we hung up, I sat on our back porch, watching the sunset. I had intended my amendment as a shield to protect the towns we served, not as a sword to bring down Drew, but perhaps it would become both. My phone buzzed with one more text from Talia. Committee called for emergency board meeting tomorrow. Requested all records of policy changes. Drew trying to block it, but Paulo says they're entitled under partnership agreements. This is getting intense. I set my phone down and took a deep breath. Whatever happened next was out of my hands. I had done what I could to protect 14 years of work. Now I needed to figure out what came next for me and my family. But something told me this story was far from over. The next morning, Gregory found me at the kitchen table, surrounded by notebooks and my laptop. Couldn't sleep? He asked, pouring himself coffee. I've been thinking about the towns, I said. They'll need help navigating whatever happens next. Even if Drew backs down, the trust is broken. I'd spent the night creating detailed notes about each town partnership, their specific needs, emergency protocols we'd established, upcoming renewal dates, information that would be lost if Drew continued his dismantling. My phone rang at 9:17 a.m. Jeffrey's name appeared on the screen. Adira, he said when I answered, his voice strained. I need to meet with you. Today, if possible. We arranged to meet at a small cafe downtown at noon. When I arrived, Jeffrey looked 10 years older than when I'd last seen him 3 months ago. Dark circles underlined his eyes, and his usually immaculate shirt was wrinkled. The board meeting was difficult, he said after ordering coffee. The town partnership committee presented evidence that Drew has been systematically undercutting our core mission while telling them one thing and me another. Jeffrey's hands trembled slightly as he pulled out a folder. He told me he was modernizing our approach. What he was actually doing was preparing to terminate our smallest town contracts, places like Springvale and Riverdale, to pursue corporate clients instead. Those towns depend on us, I said, feeling sick. Springvale's entire emergency response system is built on our protocols. I know, Jeffrey's voice cracked. My son was willing to leave them vulnerable for better profit margins. He pushed the folder toward me. The committee subpoenaed all internal communications. Drew had already negotiated with 3 corporations, promising them our proprietary systems at premium rates. He was planning to redirect our resources away from town needs. That's why he wanted me gone, I realized. I would have fought him on it, you and anyone else who understood our mission. Jeffrey looked away, his expression pained. I trusted him with my life's work, and he betrayed everything it stands for. What happens now? I asked. The board has temporarily removed him as CEO while we investigate. Jeffrey hesitated. We'd like you to come back, at least temporarily. The town representatives specifically requested it. I took a deep breath. I appreciate the offer, but I need time to think. Of course, he nodded. But there's something else you should know. Your amendment has caused quite a stir. The town partnership committee is asserting authority over many decisions Drew made. They've already voted to invalidate most of his policy changes. As I left the cafe, my phone buzzed with texts from former colleagues. Drew just got escorted out by security. Same way he did to you. Board called emergency all-staff meeting. Paulo explaining what's happening. Lots of shocked faces. TPC representatives reviewing everything. They're in Drew's office, going through files. That evening, Talia called again. You won't believe what they found, she said, her voice hushed with excitement. Drew was planning to sell our emergency response system to a private security firm. They would have charged towns triple what we do now. Did the board know? No, and it gets worse. He'd been modifying testing data to make it look like small towns weren't using our services effectively, building a case to terminate their contracts. The next day, Marion called me personally. The situation has escalated, she explained. Several town representatives have filed formal complaints with state regulators about potential ethics violations. Drew might face legal consequences beyond just losing his position. I never wanted that, I admitted. I just wanted to protect the work. Your amendment did more than that, Adira. It exposed actions that put vulnerable communities at risk. She paused. The board has met to discuss next steps. We'd like to offer you the position of interim CEO while we restructure. I nearly dropped the phone. Me? You understand the mission better than anyone. The town representatives trust you. Most importantly, you've proven you'll protect what matters, even at personal risk. I asked for time to consider it. That night, I sat with Gregory and our children, weighing my options. You could start fresh somewhere else, Gregory suggested. No baggage, no complicated history. Miriam shook her head. Mom, those towns need you. No one else understands the systems like you do. Lane, usually quiet about my work, looked up from his music sheets. You always tell us to finish what we start. 3 days after my unceremonious exit, I walked back through the company doors, not as a reinstated employee, but as the interim CEO. The atmosphere had transformed. Staff members who had avoided eye contact during my departure now greeted me warmly. Talia had decorated my new office, Jeffrey's old space, with plants from around the building. Paulo met me my first morning back, files in hand. We're still untangling Drew's actions, he explained. Some changes can be reversed immediately. Others will take time. The dress code, weekend retreats, and relocation requirements have been officially canceled. And the town partnerships? Safe for now. The committee has established a review panel to strengthen protections against future disruptions. My first official meeting as interim CEO was with the full town partnership committee. 27 representatives filled our conference room, many of whom I'd worked with for years. Mayor Chan from Lakeland spoke first. Let me be clear. This company exists because our towns chose to trust you. Specifically you, Adira. We need to know that trust wasn't misplaced. It wasn't, I assured them. And I'll prove it with actions, not words. Over the next several weeks, we systematically reviewed and reversed Drew's harmful policies. We reinforced our commitment to small towns through updated contracts that explicitly prohibited the kind of bait and switch Drew had planned. We created a transparency system that gave town representatives direct insight into our operations. Meanwhile, Drew's situation deteriorated rapidly. The state regulatory investigation uncovered communications indicating he had actively misled both the board and partners. 3 weeks after my return, Paulo informed me that Drew faced potential legal charges for fraud and breach of fiduciary duty. Jeffrey, who had been largely absent during this period, requested a meeting with me in late October. I failed in ways I never imagined possible, he admitted, sitting across from me in what was once his office. I handed my life's work to someone who saw it only as a stepping stone to wealth and status. You trusted your son? I said gently. Most parents would, perhaps, but I should have seen the signs. He straightened in his chair. The board has asked me to formally step down as chairman. I've agreed. They've recommended you take the position permanently. 6 months after Drew's attempt to push me out, I accepted the role of permanent CEO. By then, we had not only stabilized our existing town partnerships, but expanded to 5 new communities. The company charter now included robust protections against the kind of unilateral changes Drew had attempted. Section 12B, the provision he had weaponized against me, had been completely rewritten to require multiple layers of approval for any significant operational shift. The most satisfying moment came 9 months after my return. I was reviewing quarterly reports when Paulo knocked on my door. The state investigation into Drew has concluded, he announced. They've imposed significant penalties. Beyond the financial ramifications, he's been barred from serving as an officer or director of any company that contracts with municipalities for the next 10 years. Has Jeffrey been informed? I asked. Yes, he asked me to give you this. Paulo handed me an envelope. Inside was a handwritten note from Jeffrey. You protected what I built better than my own son would have. Thank you for saving not just a company, but a mission that helps real people. I was wrong to step away. You were right to stand your ground. Attached was a legal document transferring his remaining ownership shares to a newly established trust benefiting the towns we served. 1 year to the day after Drew had called me a relic in that conference room, I stood in the same space, addressing our expanded team. The wall behind me displayed a map showing the 34 communities we now served. Our work isn't about profit margins or executive perks, I told them. It's about ensuring that when emergencies happen, people know what to do in the critical minutes before help arrives. That afternoon, I drove to Springvale, one of the small towns Drew had planned to abandon, for the opening of their new emergency response center. The mayor greeted me with a hug. You know, we heard rumors last year that your company was planning to drop us, she confided as we toured the facility. That was never going to happen, I assured her. We know that now, she smiled. When the flooding hit last month, your protocols saved lives. The system worked exactly as you designed it. As we walked through the building, watching volunteers practice the procedures we'd developed together, I felt a deep sense of vindication. When I arrived home that evening, Gregory was waiting with a small cake. 1 year since everything changed, he said, kissing my cheek. Are you happy with how it turned out? I thought about the question carefully. The past year had been the most challenging of my career. Taking over as CEO hadn't been my plan. The hours were longer, the responsibilities heavier, but then I thought about Drew, who had seen power only as a way to advance his own interests, who had been willing to sacrifice community's safety for profit. His reputation was now in tatters, his career derailed by his own actions. The very authority he had wielded so carelessly had become the instrument of his downfall. The most powerful revenge hadn't been my amendment or even my return. It had been proving that leadership built on genuine service creates strength that cannot be easily broken. Yes, I told Gregory, I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. I didn't need to destroy Drew. His own actions did that. What I needed was to protect what mattered. And in doing so, I found something I hadn't expected. The understanding that sometimes the best revenge isn't bringing someone else down, but rising to heights they never thought you capable of reaching. Thank you for staying with me through this story. If it resonated with you, please consider liking and subscribing to hear more experiences like this one. Sometimes the biggest victories come from the smallest changes made at exactly the right moment. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below.